All right, ladies and gentlemen, one more time, one more video on the subject. Okay, so made like a previous video talking about resists. I've made two videos talking about resists at this point, and both of them are over an hour long, so I'm going to try to keep this one under 10 minutes. So the short version is basically this. Like everything comes down to this, right? So let's find this real quick here. There we go. All right, so down here at the bottom, no. There we go, thank you. So down here at the bottom, I've got all the sources of resist gear that you can possibly have, right? So if you have like a paladin and a shaman together, you have a 130 resist aura for everything except arcane resist. You can get up to about 100 resist all, and here are the sources for that. These 14 gem slots include blacksmithing, for the 2 extra gem slots, and it also includes, no, it's a specific resist, leatherworking for the specific resist to bracers. So this is blacksmithing, leatherworking. It's not that hard to do. I've done it like twice now. So those are all the resist sources. And then we're going to look at what life looks like for a paladin and a shaman who have decided to go into all these resistances, both in the arena and outside the arena. And the final conclusion is basically over here, where the red is what your damage reductions to certain spell types look like in the arena. That would be the red. And then the bracketed black is what it looks like outside the arena when you're allowed to use the super cheap plus 50 resist all that lasts an hour and persists through death. So, and stacks with auras and crap because it's considered a flask. So very interesting. No other sources of resistance that I know of stack. So keep that in mind. But anyway, as you can see here, we basically start out with, and this is just one variant of this. So if you look like over here, boom, 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 here we go. So if you look like over here, what you can see is this is just one variant of this, and this is a well-rounded variant in my opinion, where basically we've taken our 111 specific resist, and we've split it up as best we can into nature resistance. So we have the plus 40 here. And we've given the other plus 70, which is leather working, to the shadow resist. And the reason why we do this is because of how the armor pen works in the game. So just about every PvP guide will tell, they'll tell any arcane damage and nature damage users to get 85 spell pen because you almost never run into the shaman's nature resist totem, which we have down here, 130 nature resist totem. Never run into it. The only thing you really have to worry about for those classes is Mark of the Wild, which gives them like, I think it's 75, 85 magic resist. And so all the guides are like, hey, if you're this type of class using this type of damage, only take 85 spell pen. And we're using that to our advantage because we're going to be bumping this up by 41, but we're bumping this up by 70. But then all the paladin resists, since the paladins are very ubiquitous, they're very common in Wrath of the Lich King. And they can pick any resist aura that they want. If you are a class that is subject to resistances by paladins, you need to take 130 spell pen. So this is the kind of spell pen that you can expect in the game. So this is what your resists will look like on paper. Let me Control Z that. This is what your resists will look like on paper. This is what they will be in practice against people who have taken the appropriate amount of spell penetration. This number here is, as it states up here, it's your spell damage reduction and your percent chance to resist CC. So, for example, if you get hit by a spell that doesn't do any damage, we call these binary spells, it doesn't do any damage, it's either fully resisted or it takes its full effect, hence the term binary. So this would be like your fears and your hard CCs and your cyclones and your wind shears and poisons and all that crap. So you have a percent chance to fully resist that effect, or suffer the effect, based entirely upon like the percent damage reduction. So if you had a 30% damage reduction against nature spells, you'd have a 30% chance to tell Cyclone and Wind Shear to go F themselves. And Hex as well, 30% chance Hex just whiffs on you. And then, of course, we combine that with the 24% resilience. It's actually 24.25% resilience, but I didn't really factor that. I was like, whatever. And then you can see our total damage reductions are a nice clean 45% nature damage reduction, a nice clean 44% shadow damage reduction. These anything over 40% is untenable for these classes, like they literally can't do damage to you anymore. And then we have respectable 36% for the other ones, and then nobody really does pure arcane damage in Arena whatsoever. The only ones that do any kind of arcane damage worth noting is like Boomkin, and they're doing a split between like arcane and nature damage, but that's a respectable 26%. And of course, the numbers go into truly go F yourself territory once you hit once you're allowed the 50 resist all potion outside of Arena. So, anyways. That's the short version. Let me check the time if I want to talk about anything else. Okay, I've only been here for 5 minutes, so I'll talk about at least a couple of other things to note on the subject. So I did a previous video. It's like an hour and a half long, but the summary of that video is basically concluding it's like, what exactly do you lose? Like, what are you giving up exactly to gain these terrifying Arena and outside of Arena anti-spellcaster numbers? And the answer is nothing you're really too concerned about. So, for example, if you are a Ret Paladin and you decided to put on all this gear here, you might be doing 5% less damage than the Ret Paladin who decided he wanted like a 28% resilience and like 5% damage reduction, right? You'll be doing 5% less damage than that guy, but he's only got a 28% damage reduction against spells, whereas you've got like this in Arena and you've got like this outside the Arena. So you're literally laughing at spellcasters by comparison in exchange for like that 5% damage reduction. If you look at Shaman, for example, and this of course is true both for Preg Paladin, Ret Paladin, and I think also potentially Prot Paladin. If you look at Shaman, for example, Shamans have very similar stats. So, for example, the difference between the resist build and the not resist build is basically like 200 DPS at most. So basically you do like 3,000 DPS. You have like 3,000 spell power. You have 4,000 attack power. You've got like you have stats equal to a Ret Paladin. So a Ret Paladin stats when they don't go resist and they just do like a normal generic build, a Ret Paladin can be expected to have about 3,000 DPS and about 1,500 in combat healing per second. That's from their Art of War procs. Like when they crit, they heal themselves, right? Preg Paladins have different stats. They do something like 80% of a Ret Paladin's damage, but then they're damn near doubling the amount of healing. So they have like 2,500 HPS and like 2,500 DPS. So the Enhancement Shaman, by comparison, has 3,000 DPS, has 15, the exact same stats as the Ret Paladin, 1,500 HPS per second, and is only slightly the worse for wear as a class in general because you're wearing mail armor as opposed to plate armor on the Paladin. Moral of the story is you're not actually losing anything worth a damn. The other important thing to note in Wrath of the Lich King, if you never actually looked it up or bothered to look into it, is the spell pen stuff. So Wrath of the Lich King is very different from like classic World of Warcraft or from like Wrath of or TBC. In classic WoW and in TBC, spell pen can come from just about anywhere. So it'll be like, oh, I'm having trouble with enemy spellcaster. Let me put on this trinket or this neck piece, and boom, I've got like 200 spell pen. And you're like, damn, that sucks. It's hard to compete with that. Well, in Wrath of the Lich King, the only sources of spell pen that I've been able to identify is like 30 spell pen to cloak, which just about everybody and their dog takes. And then it's just the 20 resist spell pen gems, which I think are blue sockets, which is one of their what's the term? Saving graces. Yeah, well, one thing that saves casters with their spell pen. The moral of the story is, in order to get this 130 spell pen, most classes actually have to sacrifice like 4.5 gem slots. So if they had to try to counter you entirely, they would have to they'd have to sacrifice like another like 5 gem slots to nothing but spell pen. And even then, we're talking about blue gem slots, which start becoming more and more difficult to fill and take a prime place in their DPS. Moral of the story is, even if this playstyle kind of becomes a little rampant, it wouldn't be in the best interest of most spellcasters to try to stack enough spell penetration in their gems. Oh, the other important thing to note is it's not easily interchangeable. So, for example, either you're going to run gems are not easily interchangeable. So it's not like, oh, I'm facing these classes. Like in TBC, it's like I'm facing a guy who has a lot of resistances. Let me switch out my rings. Let me switch out my neck piece, and let's get it on. It's so much harder to switch out your really, really expensive gems every time you want to try to deal with one of these jackasses that has gone full resist, basically. So it's kind of pricey for them to play the pen game, whereas it's pretty easy for us to play the resist game. The primary reason why it's easy for us to play the resist game is because we're leaning heavily on all these auras, basically. And then resists are just so valuable as is. So anyways, I might just end the video here, keep it nice and short, keep it around 10 minutes. I think there was one other thing I wanted to mention before I go, and that is the resist build compared to like the resilience build, it does make you weaker against certain melee classes. Obviously, you'd be thinking that. But paladins don't really care because they're in plate armor and they have a bunch of defensive cooldowns, and they're more than happy to go toe-to-toe with most enemy melee classes. As a shaman, it's especially enhancement shaman, it's a little scary because you're like a two-handed male user, where typically you kind of struggle with those physical damage dealing classes. However, I would point out that number of classes that are not subject to resistances, and therefore your resistances have no effect whatsoever on them, is very few. So, for example, your resistances are kind of at play facing a kitty cat druid specifically. Because it helps you resist cyclones, it helps you reduce nature damage. I mean, arcane damage and nature damage if they throw any of that your way. Entangling roots can be resisted, all that stuff, right? Death Knights, it depends on the Death Knight, but just about all Death Knights take almost no magic pen whatsoever, and they actually do a lot of magic damage that is subject to your resistances. So it's not like your resistances are useless against Death Knights. They're actually pretty damn good. Against rogues, you would think it would be completely useless, but look at this. Rogues almost take no armor pen or no magic pen whatsoever. So you end up having something stupid like, I can do the math on it here real fast. We got 271. Okay, 271. So we're assuming a rogue didn't take any magic pen whatsoever. Divide that by 6.5 to get our % damage reduction. And basically what this means is you have like basically a 42% chance to resist their poisons. Like their poisons are not getting applied 42% of the time, or you're reducing their poison damage they deal to you from their poisons on their weapons by like 42%. Blind is still a physical, so it's not affected by that, blah, 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 right? So it's not completely useless against rogues. By any stretch of the imaginations, rogues actually absolutely despise that level of nature resist. Especially against like paladins and classes that they're really relying on their nature procs in order to like slow down your healing or to cut your healing in half, or blah 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 blah, right? It doesn't do anything against arms warriors. Arms warriors are like, oh, you brought resistances, that's adorable. Outside of the exception that, like, if they grenade you or something like that, there's a double resist for the grenade. So if you fully resist the grenade, then you don't get stunned. If you don't resist the grenade, meaning you take damage from the grenade, there's still a resist check to see if you resisted the stun or not. The stun part of the grenade is a fire resist check. So it's not like fire resist is pretty damn good against them, which is kind of amusing. But that's if they're throwing engineering your way and all that kind of crud. Yeah, so out of the top of my head, it's like, okay, your resistances don't do anything against paladins. They don't do anything against arms warriors, and that's it. It's like, and for the most part, kitty cats. They don't do anything effectively against kitty cats. But other than that, your resistances are good against almost every melee class in the entire game, which is kind of messed up. And you're definitely giving spellcasters the middle finger, both in and outside of the arena. So, and I'm a huge fan of this. Like, I keep looking at it, because I looked into the whole resilience thing. I was like, okay, well, you can activate all your gem slots and get like 28% resilience, or you can say to hell with the socket bonuses. You can activate all the socket bonuses, or you can say to hell with the socket bonuses and get like 32% resilience. And then I started comparing that to, all right, what if I'm not 32% resilience and I go this resistance route? And the answer is you might be better off going the resilience route with the shaman, but you're definitely better off going the resistance route with the paladin. And then if you build your shaman a certain way, you're definitely better off going with the resistances. So, for example, I built my shaman in such a way, I did the math on just how bad critical strike chance is. And basically, I went with the PvE build, but I'm using it in PvP. So basically, my Fire Nova Totem has a 3-second cooldown, and it tends to smack things. Long story short, it does like 650 DPS Fire Nova Totem. And the whole idea behind it is, well, if I have to chase someone, like if someone's running away from me and I'm beating on them and they're running away from me, I can't Fire Nova Totem. But anything that wants to stand toe-to-toe with me in melee, which is all the things I really don't like to fight, I can just barf on them with Fire Nova. Literally, my cooldown rotation is Storm Strike, Fire Nova, Earth Shock, Fire Nova, something else, Fire Nova, something else, Fire Nova, 1 GCD, Fire Nova, 1 GCD, Fire Nova. Like, that's your rotation. And you end up spitting out like 3,000 HP DPS to targets and like 40% armor. It's kind of ridiculous. So the whole idea behind it is like, yeah, I'm not happy to fight these melee classes with all this resistance stuff, but I can make up for that in other ways. The same way Preg Paladin, like, hey, bring it on, is what Preg Paladin is saying, and Ret Paladin is usually like, bring it on as well to anything that wants to stand toe to toe with them in melee. Yeah, so anyways, I'm going to end the video here. Do not sleep on Resist and Wrath. They are absolutely ridiculous. And Deus Vult, boys.